Why does society feel uneasy when it encounters a Muslim who truly lives by faith? The discomfort is not caused by clothing, background, or language. It comes from something far deeper. A true believer carries values that cannot be bought, discipline that cannot be broken, and courage that cannot be silenced. These qualities challenge modern systems that thrive on weakness, distraction, and control. In this video, we will uncover perspectives rarely spoken about, why sincerity, devotion, and independence make the world take notice. To understand why a true Muslim is feared, we must explore the deeper qualities faith creates within a person. 1. Fear of unshakable identity. In today's world, identity has become a product. Media tells you what to admire, advertising tells you what to buy, and trends tell you who to become. The entire system thrives on shaping people into restless consumers who never feel complete. Yet when society encounters a Muslim who truly lives by faith, something different appears. A person who cannot be molded by fashion, peer pressure, or the ever-changing winds of morality. A true Muslim does not need validation from likes on a screen or approval from a crowd. Their sense of self is rooted in something timeless, a creator who defines worth through character, not appearance. This unshakable identity unsettles the world because most industries profit from insecurity. If people were content, entire empires of marketing would collapse. Think about it. Beauty companies thrive when people feel unattractive. Entertainment grows when people fear silence. And fashion makes billions when people doubt their own image. But when a Muslim walks confidently with faith, society sees someone who cannot be sold self-worth in a bottle or a slogan. That silent resistance becomes louder than any protest. This strength of identity has always been feared. Empires throughout history tried to erase faith because it made their subjects less controllable. A believer who knows who they are cannot be manipulated into false identities. They cannot be bought with glitter or frightened by rejection. This is why the presence of a true Muslim challenges not only culture, but the very economy that thrives on fragile identities. It's not about rebellion, it's about self-assurance that refuses to bow to trends. But identity is only the surface. What truly shakes society is the discipline that comes with this faith. 2. Fear of discipline in a world of excess. Modern society normalizes indulgence at every level. Overeating, overspending, endless scrolling, and constant entertainment are presented as normal lifestyles. To say no is to stand out. Yet a true Muslim lives by a different rhythm: moderation, fasting, and self-control. This is not seen as restriction, but as strength, a way to master the body instead of being enslaved by it. This quiet discipline exposes the weakness of a society built on addiction. Food companies rely on people overeating, alcohol industries profit from broken homes, and digital platforms depend on endless distraction. But the one who trains themselves to break desires through fasting, through daily prayer routines, through guarding what they consume, becomes someone who cannot be easily trapped. Corporations know this. A disciplined consumer is a dangerous consumer. Dangerous not because they harm others, but because they refuse to be manipulated. Someone who fasts for a month each year is not terrified of missing a meal. Someone who lowers their gaze is not controlled by shallow images. Someone who can walk away from excess does not fuel industries that survive on addiction. This is why discipline unsettles society. It removes the chains of consumption and reveals the emptiness of excess. When people see Muslims thriving with less, eating simply, dressing modestly, living within limits, it quietly questions everything the world has told them about happiness. The fear is not about rituals, it is about the strength those rituals build. A disciplined soul is harder to bribe, harder to tempt, and harder to silence. That is why the world does not simply dislike self-control, it fears it. Discipline naturally leads to courage, and courage is something most systems cannot tolerate. 3. Fear of courage to speak truth. Most people learn early in life to avoid uncomfortable truths. They stay quiet when something is wrong at work. They look away when injustice happens in their community, and they silence themselves when truth threatens their comfort. This silence is rewarded with approval, safety, and status. But a true Muslim does not operate that way. Faith teaches that justice must be spoken, even if it is against your own self, your family, or those in power. This type of courage cannot be explained by ordinary logic. It comes from knowing that silence in the face of wrongdoing is not neutrality, it is complicity. This is what makes society uneasy. When someone dares to speak the truth without concern for popularity or personal gain, the entire system feels threatened. Political corruption thrives on silence. Workplace exploitation survives because employees are afraid to risk their positions. Social hypocrisy continues because no one wants to stand out. One person who breaks that silence becomes a ripple that can turn into a wave. History shows us that tyrants never feared crowds. They feared the lone voice of truth that could not be bought or silenced. That single voice often awakened millions, whether it was prophets confronting kings or reformers challenging unjust rulers. The pattern is clear. Truth spoken with courage is more dangerous than armies. A Muslim who embodies this principle is feared not because of aggression, but because of integrity. They cannot be bribed into silence or threatened into obedience. Their strength is not measured in numbers, but in honesty. And when truth is paired with independence, the fear multiplies. 4. Fear of financial independence. Modern economies are not built on freedom. They are built on chains. Debt, interest, and financial obligations keep people tied to systems they cannot question. When you owe the bank, you obey. When your survival depends on a paycheck, you compromise. This is why a Muslim who strives to avoid exploitative systems such as riba, interest-based transactions, is seen as a problem. They are harder to control. Financial independence is more than money. It is mental liberation. A person who lives within their means, avoids debt, and refuses corrupt income cannot be pressured the way others can. If threatened with job loss, they do not sell their soul for security. If offered wealth through unethical means, they walk away without hesitation. This kind of independence confuses societies that rely on obedience through financial fear. Governments, corporations, and institutions count on people being too dependent to resist. But a believer who sees wealth as a trust from the Creator, not as an idol to be worshipped, stands outside that trap. Imagine a worker who does not fear poverty because they trust provision comes from the Creator, not from a paycheck. Imagine a family that builds its life on honesty instead of credit. That family cannot be enslaved by the same chains that keep others quiet. This is why true financial independence, founded on faith, is unsettling. It produces individuals who cannot be easily manipulated. They are free to stand for justice because their survival does not depend on pleasing oppressors. They can reject corruption without trembling at the thought of losing comfort. Independence is one part, but society also fears how Muslims view life and death itself. 5. Fear of different view of life and death. Approximately 350 words. For most people, death is the greatest fear. It is seen as the ultimate end, the moment when everything is lost. Because of this, societies and rulers have always used death as a weapon of control. Threaten someone's life and they will obey. Promise safety and they will submit. Entire systems of power rest on this fear. But a true Muslim sees death differently. Death is not the end. It is a passage to another existence, a meeting with the Creator, and a continuation of the soul's journey. This understanding removes the ultimate tool of intimidation. What can you threaten someone with when the very thing you threaten them with is something they already accept with peace? This view explains why history remembers believers who stood fearlessly against oppression, soldiers who fought without fear of death, activists who spoke even when execution awaited them, reformers who endured torture without surrender. These people terrified their enemies not because of weapons or numbers, but because they could not be silenced by fear. Societies built on fear cannot comprehend this. If a system relies on people being too afraid to resist, then someone who embraces mortality with faith becomes its greatest challenge. This is not about seeking death, but about living with a freedom that death cannot take away. To live unshaken by death is to live truly free, and freedom at that level disturbs every fragile system that relies on keeping people weak and terrified. This freedom from fear creates a level of resilience that disturbs fragile systems. 6. Fear of resilience against psychological warfare. In the modern age, control does not always come from physical threats. It often comes through psychological warfare. Propaganda tells people what to believe. Shaming forces them into silence. Isolation convinces them they are alone. These tools are subtle, but they are powerful. Yet a Muslim grounded in faith is far harder to manipulate. Daily prayer becomes a rhythm that cannot be broken by propaganda. Remembrance of the Creator builds an inner voice louder than the voices of critics. The sense of community built in faith prevents the loneliness that makes others collapse. Unique insight. The routines of faith are not just rituals, they are anchors. The call to prayer 5 times a day breaks the hold of endless distraction. Fasting trains the will to resist impulses. Reading scripture recenters the mind in truth, no matter how much falsehood surrounds it. These habits create resilience that psychological manipulation cannot easily penetrate. This is why a practicing Muslim unsettles systems that rely on shaping emotions and thoughts. They see someone who refuses to be shamed, who does not collapse under slander, and who finds strength in a community that cannot be easily fractured. Beyond resilience, there is another fear: when Muslims unite around justice. 7. Fear of collective brotherhood. Society thrives on division. Lines are drawn by race, class, politics, and even lifestyle choices. The more divided people are, the easier they are to manipulate. When groups are busy fighting one another, they rarely notice the structures that exploit them. Division is not accidental, it is engineered. But a true Muslim carries a different vision. Brotherhood is not limited by nationality, wealth, or background. It is built on faith and shared values. To pray side by side with someone regardless of skin color or social status is to declare that the labels society uses to divide have no power here. This is unsettling for systems built on inequality. If people unite on the basis of justice and faith, the walls between them crumble. Without division, manipulation weakens. Without manipulation, control begins to collapse. History proves this point. Empires did not fall to Muslims because of superior weapons or massive wealth. They fell because believers had unity of heart and purpose. Their sense of brotherhood could not be broken by tribal differences or political borders. That unity became their strength, and it terrified powers that relied on division. And yet, all these qualities point to one ultimate fear: submission to no one but the Creator. 8. Fear of submission that liberates. From the outside, submission looks like weakness. To bow in prayer or surrender desires to divine will may appear to outsiders as losing freedom. But in reality, submission is liberation. True submission to the Creator frees a person from slavery to trends, systems, and oppressive rulers. When a believer submits to a higher authority, no human authority can fully dominate them. Their loyalty belongs to the one who created them, not to the fleeting powers of the world. This is what society fears most. Control is lost when people no longer bow to materialism, propaganda, or corruption. How do you manipulate someone who no longer seeks approval from peers? How do you enslave someone who has already surrendered their will to something greater? Submission may look fragile, but it is unshakable strength. A person who kneels before the Creator cannot be forced to kneel before tyranny. They become untouchable by manipulation because their dignity no longer depends on worldly masters. This is why a true Muslim, even if poor or alone, carries a power that frightens entire structures. Society does not fear appearances, it fears the strength of values. Identity that cannot be shaken, discipline that cannot be broken, courage that cannot be silenced, independence that cannot be bought, resilience that cannot be crushed, brotherhood that cannot be divided, and submission that cannot be manipulated. A true Muslim is not feared for violence, but for integrity that stands unbroken. If you recognize these qualities within yourself, nurture them. If you wish to embody them, begin today. Ask yourself, what would society see in you? Another follower of trends or someone walking with the unshakable strength of truth?